Hey folks, it's time for another Letters to an Asexual. This is number 77, and I'm going to try to do one of these outside again. I'm hoping that I'm not going to get too much interference from weird noises or anything, so we'll see what happens. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to share some conversations that I saw happen on a Tumblr reblog chain, and this was not something that I was personally involved with, and I also don't want to read the entire conversation, but I'm going to kind of paraphrase it so that you understand what I'm going to be responding to. It's not completely unlike some conversations that I've unfortunately been part of. I actually will reference one of them in my response. But this is kind of on the subject of people who feel like sex is a requirement in a relationship, and that if you say you shouldn't be obligated to provide that in a relationship, that you're therefore calling them a bad person on some level for wanting it, or for feeling that that is a necessary ingredient of their relationship. That, as you will see in my elaborate response, is not something that I believe, but the level of entitlement that some people have to having that desire satisfied in relationships is something that we should question. And ultimately, the takeaway from a lot of this is compatibility is very important, and all of the people in any relationship will carry equal responsibility for that, not to discount how much power the status quo has, leaning to the side of the person who desires sex because that's normal. And I have actually talked about this in one other video where I had a direct conversation with someone who was commenting on my author website on this subject, saying that it was just a given that you're owed a certain amount of sex if it isn't otherwise discussed, and that his desires happen to match with the default, that you just owe someone if you're not going to make a different arrangement. So first I'm going to get into kind of a summary that I wrote that should do my best to paraphrase what these folks were saying. So I will start with that. Somebody on Tumblr had posted this blog, very short opening, saying you shouldn't guilt trip your sex-repulsed partner into sex, and somehow this became controversial. So one of the replies involved a person twisting that statement and suggesting the original poster was advocating shaming of people who need or want sex, and that advocating for proper enthusiastic consent was actually an attempt to guilt trip people who want sex. And another person piped up to say, if you don't want to have sex but your partner wants to, then you're forcing them to be unfulfilled in the relationship, and it's your responsibility to break up with them. And someone else said they would never date someone who didn't have the same sexual needs. So the original poster came back to clarify, pointing out they never suggested anyone be forced to date anyone they didn't want to date, or to stay in relationships that they aren't happy in. So they were just saying, if they're dating someone who is sex repulsed, the answer isn't guilt them into sex because you have needs. So a few other cool people pointed out they've been through phases where, because of trauma or health issues, they could not have sex or didn't desire sex for a time, even though they used to. And that didn't mean they didn't love their partner. And that resorting to guilting someone into sex can prolong trauma or make it take longer for the person to return to their normal desires. So some people who had actually been through it described the guilt that they felt and how damaging it is to spin a sex-repulsed person as cruel or depriving a partner who simply deserves sex. Because obviously most people prioritize the person who wants it and entirely blame the person who doesn't, either suggesting they are the one who doesn't deserve satisfaction or suggesting they should default to seeing their needs as secondary. So the assholes of the post came back and whined about how the entire point of the original poster's blog was to make people feel guilty for their innocent, natural desire for sex, and that it's all about shaming dirty sex havers. That's a term they actually used. That it was designed to teach people in relationships that they must be forced to stay with people who won't or can't have sex, or else they're villains. And someone else asked that person why don't rape people and don't guilt people into sex is being turned into, you have to date asexual people even if you're not compatible. And the original poster said actually they are the dirty sex haver in this situation, and they have a partner who is sometimes sex repulsed, and they think it's reasonable to just take care of their desires themselves if their partner isn't into it. So of course the jerk comes back to ask why they're a bad person if they need sex in their relationships, and why they'd be a bad person to leave if they weren't getting laid, which, you know, isn't what they said. I thought it was pretty clear that their advice was don't pressure people to have sex. Not you have to just tolerate it if you and your partner aren't sexually compatible and you're a dirty sex haver. So they went on for a while about how you literally called us all rapists if we desire sex. So even though this was not a conversation I participated in, I want to share some thoughts that I have on the topic of you're calling me a rapist and shaming me just for wanting sex. Okay, so reading through conversations like that, I was seeing consistent translation of don't coerce / guilt / force people into sex into you are shaming me and accusing me of rape just for wanting sex. So, but then those same people are also making statements that do suggest that whatever partner they're with is responsible for satisfying their sex drive, and that's actually failure to fulfill a perceived obligation that's abusive. No, saying sex-repulsed people should not have to have sex is not the same thing as telling you you're bad for wanting it. Your desire for sex does not entitle you to receiving sex from your partner. Also, framing withholding sex as abusive buys right into rape culture. Nobody called you a terrible person for desiring sex. And nobody advocated staying in relationships where your needs are not being met to an unacceptable degree. Nobody called you a rapist for wanting sex. And nobody perceives you as a dirty sex haver for the crime of having or desiring sex. But yeah, you're a shitty person if you use your desires and the enormous power of the status quo to make a sex-repulsed person feel they must have sex with you because you want them to. And yeah, you're a shitty person if don't make people feel obligated to have sex with you translates to you're forcing me to go without in your mind. You know all those people who condescendingly told aces, and I guess sex-repulsed people or people who don't want sex at all / as much as their partners by association, that they should just date each other, obviously. Well, why doesn't that apply to them? Why don't they just date each other? Well, or if they are in a situation that requires them to either break up or find a compromise, is it too much to ask that they stop treating their desire for sex as more important and more deserving of satisfaction than the desire of their partner or partners? Also, pointing out that someone's behavior enables rape culture is not the same thing as calling someone a rapist. If you defend that desiring sex entitles you to that sex from a specific person, and you've dubbed that person responsible for your satisfaction, no, you're not necessarily raping someone, but you are contributing to a societal dynamic that encourages people to view sex as a right. Your right to pursue sex is not in question. Your right to pursue it from a specific person shorts out at the border of that person's bodily autonomy. Your sexual needs are not dirty or wrong, but when you frame their satisfaction as another person's responsibility against their will, that is manipulative, especially considering how societal expectations already automatically put sex-repulsed people at a disadvantage in advocating for themselves. Don't ignore that. We're not and have never been on equal ground when it comes to whose needs are perceived as more important. When you exploit that dynamic to get what you want, knowing that your partner is probably already having to resist programmed guilt and shame to even express to you that they don't want to consent, you deserve the shame you get. Make no mistake, that shame is not doled out because you want sex or want to feel loved and desired by your partner. It's because people who try to make others feel that they can't say no deserve to be shamed. I recently had a conversation that was along these same lines, though it didn't get as nasty. If you want to read some thoughts on it, I've posted about it elsewhere. A person commented on my website claiming ace people just don't understand what it's like to expect a comprehensive sex life and not get it, and went on to say that people are expected in relationships to have sex, and I quote, 2 to 3 times a week for 20 to 60 minutes each session. If this person opined other arrangements are agreed upon, that's fine, but if it has not been discussed otherwise, it's perfectly reasonable to assume that this level and frequency of sex is going to be happening. It's the default, and it's understood by all who play the game as definitively how pawns are expected to move in a game of chess. And the person who will not offer sex on these terms is, in fact, reneging on a universally understood contract. This commenter literally went on to say that not doing so is tantamount to not paying for your meal in a restaurant, or transplanting foreign rules onto chess moves, or getting out of the cab without paying the fare, or refusing to use the toilet. Real examples. These are the person's real examples. You can read the thread to see I am not exaggerating. That is the entitlement that we're talking about here, y'all. People like this claim we have to disclose, negotiate, or take exception while they have a right to expect. And that the situation automatically defaults to their standard unless we say otherwise. If a person actually thinks sex in a relationship is part of an understood contract, it's not surprising that they treat it like a violation when they don't receive it. My argument is that no contract terms about sex automatically exist when people have a relationship. And one of my goals in activism is to destroy the idea that anyone ever owes another person sex, as a default or otherwise. The fact that people are arguing about this at all makes it clear that this is a conversation you have to have without assumptions. And it is necessary that all partners respect each other's needs and acknowledge that those needs can fluctuate. Surprisingly, not. The person I was arguing with concluded that I am accusing all sex-desiring people of being rapists, and insisted that requests for respect translate directly to trapping non-ace people in unhappy relationships. They also, of course, claimed my bias toward asexual people meant I can't handle any dissent, and that the only conversations I welcome are exchanges in which people smile and agree with me, framing me as being unable to handle arguments, because I countered every entitled statement was pretty disingenuous. But that's pretty common here too. They say something gross, you respond with why you think they're wrong, and you're told you can't deal with opinions. When said opinions threaten the sexual consent, body autonomy, and mental health of some of the most vulnerable people in society, and when said opinions resoundingly echo the aggressively inculcated perspectives of mainstream culture that is in no danger of being drowned out or left unvoiced. Yeah, I guess I just can't deal with it. It's not just an opinion, because it's used to convince members of my community and those who intersect with it that someone else's desires are always, by default, more important than theirs. Being in a relationship is not consent to sex. It is not understood consent to sex. It is not understood consent to any amount of sex. And it is not a blanket level of consent to sex that applies unless it's explicitly declined. If sex from your partner is vital to your happiness, what we're saying is your solution should never involve pressuring a sex-repulsed person. That should not be controversial, and it should not be taken to mean that sex-desiring people don't have important needs, or that they become rapists just by wanting sex. I will end it here before I start talking too much about things that I am really not authorized to talk about. So, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.